Last week, more than 25,000 law enforcement officers gathered in Washington, D.C. for National Police Week. One of the most moving tributes of the week included the annual candlelight vigil to honor officers who've made the ultimate sacrifice. In honor of the service police officers make to communities throughout America, we've invited two active duty law enforcement officers to tell us about their lives in uniform. Our guests today are Assistant Chief Maurita Bryant of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police via Skype. She is also the current president of NOBLE, N-O-B-L-E, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. And here in our studio is Officer Yusuf Hamm, and we appreciate both of you for being here with us.
Thank you.
I want to start with you, Yusuf. You're sitting right here. You know, particularly here in New York City, being a police officer, you take a lot of beating from the media, from the community as well. Do you think overall in this day and age that law enforcement officers are largely misunderstood?
Well, absolutely. A lot of people don't understand that law enforcement officers are regular citizens. We have to pay taxes. We have to abide by the laws and regulations of the particular counties we live in. And what a lot of the public perceive us as a separate entity, a total separate being. We're not human, but we are human. We go to church, we shop just as everyone does. Everything that normal folks do, we do the same thing.
And you know, Maurita, I want to bring you into this. I do believe that the perception has changed. Tell me if you agree with this. When I was growing up as a little girl, a police officer was revered, especially an African-American one, even in an African-American community. They were considered heroes. They were considered the authority there. Now, none of that seems to be in place in our society, particularly with our young people, wouldn't you say?
It's changed greatly. The respect for the law enforcement officer just by their mere presence coming on the scene has changed to one that is not just that you respect an officer because they are a police officer, they're there to help you. There's so many contributing factors to where younger people don't have that same type of respect that a lot of the older citizens do.
Maurita, talk a little bit about what it's like to live with the daily danger, and it is a daily danger, to work as a police officer.
Well, there's so many challenges being a police officer because you can just go answer a call, a 911 call, and you never know what's going to be on the other side of the door. You face that all the time, but the officers that go out and do the job every day, they disregard that. They're there to protect people, to serve people, to enforce the law. So they know that there's a danger, but you still have to go out and do your job.
Yusuf, I wonder, you know, there's no shortage of opinions as to what police shouldn't be doing. I wonder, though, what are some of the things that you think would help build, foster community between the police department and the communities in which they serve, particularly, though, the minority communities?
Simple conversation. When you see a police officer standing on the corner, just walk up and say hello. It's amazing how much of a conversation generated from a simple hello. What happens is a conversation between a hello conversation, it generates an opportunity for you to interact with that police officer to build a relationship with you, to know what your community needs are, your community concerns are, and it allows that person who's in that uniform to feel a little bit more comfortable in the community. Once you feel comfortable in the community, then you understand what the needs and concerns of the community are, and you're better able to adapt to that and adjust and satisfy the needs.
Yeah. A quick question I have for Chief Bryant, I guess, and for you as well. It's a two-part question. One is, what do you think has contributed to this decline in respect that we seem to acknowledge has taken place with respect to police? And as a part of it, do you think, it may be a small thing, but do you think that residency requirements might make a difference in terms of police having to live in the cities, the communities that they're supposed to serve?
Maurita, why don't you take that first?
Here in Pittsburgh, we do have a residency requirement where police officers have to live in the city. That, to me, makes all the difference in the world, because if you don't live where you police, you have a tendency to disconnect with the community. So I think residency is very important. The internet, the media, everything has changed the way that people can see 24/7, 4 and 5 times a day, bad things that may have occurred that police officers were involved in. So it changes the perception of how the community views policing. Years and years ago, you didn't have that barrage of media highlighting the different events that occur throughout the nation. Today you do.
Yusuf, Maurita brings up a really interesting point, and that is living in the community in which you are assigned to, which has been very controversial here in New York City, and I won't ask you to dive into that. But is there a difference for you to be assigned to a community of people where the community largely looks like you, or otherwise?
When I first became a police officer, I said, you know what, I want to work in the community, which represents me. But as you grow and mature in the job, the whole area represents you, and it's a resident requirement is absolutely fantastic. But that's not to say that those who don't live in the area aren't able to represent and identify with those who live in the area. I was born and raised in Harlem. I was a police officer in the city, so it was quite a interesting thing to give back to the community, because a lot of people didn't have that connection with a police officer. And so, by them knowing you and seeing you daily, that built a different connection and an opportunity to talk to you and just feel more freely to give you information about activity in the neighborhood that they didn't feel give it to other officers.
Chief Bryant, you talked about residency requirement. I'm wondering, though, particularly when it comes to the minority communities, the Black and Hispanic communities, is part of the answer repairing the relationship between law enforcement and the community? Does part of that answer rest in simply hiring more African American cops, more Hispanic cops?
I'd say yes and no. For police departments, it's the administrators that sets the tone for the type of conduct that will be tolerated or not tolerated within the department. But it's the police officers on the street who interact with the public on a daily basis who set the standard for what will be perceived fair or unfair by the way they police. Now, for African American officers or officers of color especially, they should be aware of their responsibility to be more empathetic and to the challenges that impact the minority community, because they can make a difference on how other officers police their community, and they can bridge the gap between understanding what's going on there. So it's not necessarily that you have to have Black officers police a Black community or white officers just police a white community. You just have to have a good professional police officer in whatever community.
I want to ask you, Maurita, one question. Of course, Yusuf is a police officer here in this area and agreed to come on and not talk about this subject, but I want to ask you about this. Here in New York City, there's a very controversial policy in the New York Police Department called stop and frisk, and it has bred a lot of contempt and a lot of controversy. Do you have something similar there in Pittsburgh, and what's your assessment of a program like this?
Stop and frisk, as long as the officer has probable cause. Yes, it's necessary. There are so many weapons on the street today, but you have to have probable cause to stop someone. You just don't randomly pick individuals off the street and just search them. There has to be some reasonable suspicion, some probable cause that make you believe that that individual has a weapon or has something on them that can hurt you.
All right, we'll have to leave it right there. Maurita Bryant, Yusuf Hamm, thank you to both of you. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service to the community.
Thank you.
And you are watching Arise America.